Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck, and today I'm doing my January wrap-up. So in January, I read 6 books, which I actually felt really good about because for the last 10 days or so, maybe, I don't know, for the last week or more of January, I wasn't really reading because I was traveling and then I was at a meditation retreat. And the meditation retreat that I was going to was a silent retreat. So for 5 days we were in silence, and when in silence, that means you don't talk, you don't make eye contact, but you also don't read or write or listen to music or anything like that. Anyways, all that to say that I read 6 books in the first half of January, so I feel really good about the number of books that I got through in January. So without further ado, let's get into the actual wrap-up part of this. So to start off in January, the first book of the year, which is a really important thing, to me at least, to pick, I read Heir to Seven Waters by Juliet Marilia, which is the 4th book in her Seven Waters series. This year I don't have a new book of hers, so I thought I'd do a reread. And I also like this one because it checks off some of my resolutions for the year of rereading more books and of finishing rereading this entire series. The Seven Waters series is a Celtic historical fantasy which follows different generations of women in one family. This book follows Clodagh, who, I think that's how you say her name. She is the 3rd daughter of the Lord of Seven Waters. She has 5 sisters, and her mother is pregnant with a 7th child who she believes will be a son, and that she has always wanted a son, but everyone is really nervous about the mother being pregnant because she's getting older and they're not sure that she or the baby will survive. After her mother has the baby is then kidnapped by the fair folk, and a changeling is left in its place, and Clodagh is the only one who knows that it is the fair folk who have taken the child and not a rival chieftain. So she takes the changeling and runs off into the forest against her family's wishes to find the fair folk, find her brother, and to win him back. Something that I had forgotten about this was that it has kind of weird pacing, because the first half of the book is all set up. So that whole summary that I gave you, that's the first half of the book. That's not spoilers also, because it's all on the back of the book in the description, but all of that setup is the first half of the book. The adventure part of trying to get her brother back and find the fair folk to make the exchange, that's the second half of the book. So it had a really slow start. I think that the first time I read it, I didn't realize that it had such a slow start. It was just since I reread it, I knew that the adventure part was coming, and so I was kind of waiting for it to start, and it didn't start until later on. But when I was going into it blind the first time reading it, the pacing didn't bother me. Once it gets into the adventure part of the story, it is a little bit more fast-paced. There are more fantastical creatures because she starts interacting with the fair folk. Something that I always really love about these stories is that all of the female characters in these are very strong characters, but they're not always strong in that kick-ass kind of way. They're really strong in a way, the strength of their love and loyalty and devotion, and they use traditionally feminine qualities or skills to help them save the day. And I really enjoy that use of those feminine qualities or skills, instead of being oh, the only way for a female character to be strong is for her to have a sword and kick ass. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I would have given it more except for that weird pacing. The second book that I read in January is Vicious by VE Schwab. This is the first book by VE Schwab that I have ever read, and I was a little hesitant going into it because it's a fantasy or sci-fi-ish book, but it's like set in the real world, and sometimes I struggle with those. I'm very much like a high fantasy reader. But I really enjoyed this one. This is a very well-known book, but if you don't know, this follows two friends, Eli and Victor, who are college roommates, and they figure out how to give themselves superpowers. But once they give themselves superpowers, their lives take a weird turn, and the way the book is set up is that it starts out with Victor having just gotten out of prison, and now he wants revenge on his former friend Eli. The book jumps between times, so it has a storyline that is present day where Victor has just gotten out of prison and he is trying to get his revenge, and then it has flashbacks to the past where we are learning about how their friendship started, how they learned how to give themselves these superpowers, and then how Victor ended up in prison. What was the falling out that these two friends had? This book was kind of unexpected for me. As I said, I was kind of apprehensive going into it. I also wasn't intending to read it this month, but I just kind of like looked over at it and was like, oh, like, let's just pick it up. It just like has, I don't know, it just like seemed like the right vibe for me for some reason. And I'm really glad that I picked it up because I loved this. I loved Victor. I love like the storyline. I love that it's all of these like morally gray characters, and they're morally gray characters really done right. I've said before that like sometimes I like morally gray characters, sometimes I don't. It really depends on if they're done well, and this is them really done well, because even the main characters and like the ones that we're following and are sympathetic to us, they're not good people, you know? So like there will be this main character where Victor, you know, he protects the people who are close to him, and you start to really sympathize with him for what's happened to him and how the turn that his life has taken. But then like he'll go off on this tangent about how much he likes to like torture and murder people, and it gives him a sense of calm, and that's really weird. And like, so sometimes like I would get really invested and be like, oh yeah, I like you so much, and then he would say something really weird like that, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, like you're a villain too. I actually really enjoyed that kind of like dissonance that it created for me of how much I liked them, but also how like they were bad people. And it was a great ride. I can't even talk about it right now. I'm probably gonna make a book talk about this where I'm just gonna like ramble about all of my thoughts about it. The one thing I will say right now also is that I was not aware that it jumped between the present and the past, and that was something that I found a little bit jarring. Like once I got used to it, it was okay. So it like threw me off for a while, and they do put like timestamps where they tell you like which day or year it is, so really pay attention to those because it's really helpful, because sometimes I would just start reading a chapter and be super confused and then realize like, oh, this is happening 10 years ago. So be aware of that. Also, just a little warning for this, that there is a dog that dies in this book, so just be aware. That's a thing that I always want people to tell me. Like, so I'll still read the book, but like I want to be emotionally prepared if a dog dies in a book, or just any like beloved animal. Like I just want to know. I don't need to know which one. I just want to know that I should be prepared. So I'm telling you guys, a dog dies in this book. Be aware, but still read it. It's really good. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. So second book of the year, already my first 5-star read of the year, so super excited. The third book that I read in January is a book of poetry called God Went to Beauty School by Cynthia Ryland. So I recently raided my mom's library, and my mom has like a ton of books. Most of her books are about spirituality and things like that because that's what she is interested in. But she also has quite a bit of poetry, mostly spiritual poetry. And as I've been trying to read more poetry, I thought that I would see what kind of poetry she had and check it out, see if there was anything that I liked. So I picked this one up because I just read like one little poem out of it, and it was so cute. Like, this is the cutest book. So this is a book of poetry that's just like all of these little poems about God doing little just like life things. So in one of them, like, God goes to beauty school and God makes fudge, and my favorite one is God buys a couch. It was so cute. So in that one, it's about how God tries to buy a couch, but they won't let him because his billing address and his shipping address don't match, because he wants the couch sent to heaven, but his billing address is hell. Like, it's just the funniest thing. Like, I feel like this has somewhat similar humor to, like, the Percy Jackson books. So if you like the Percy Jackson, Rick Riordan verse books and you want to read a book of poetry, this one is very funny and super adorable. But it also is kind of beautiful in its own way, because it's about how God sees the world as being so beautiful because he's created it but hasn't necessarily experienced it. And so, like, testing out this world that God created and finding the beauty in these, like, little mundane moments that we may take for granted as part of our human lives, but God thinks is beautiful. And I just thought that was such a beautiful approach to life and the world and human existence and all of it. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I probably would have given it more, except the last poem kind of took a weird turn. I don't know, it was something about, like, God dies, and it just took a strange turn that I was not a fan of. So, like, I liked all of the poems except for that last one, and I was just like, I kind of wish it hadn't ended this way. Anyways, 4 out of 5 stars, super cute. The next book that I read is Lament by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the first book in her Books of Fairy series. There are 2 books. There were supposed to be 3, but the last one hasn't been published. And this is actually a less known series of hers. In this one, we follow Dee, who is a Celtic harp player. And she is an amazing musician, but then also finds out that she is a clover hand, which means that she's able to see fairies. And that means that fairies are drawn to her. Of course, in this one, then she meets a extremely beautiful supernatural boy who she immediately falls in love with, and then craziness ensues. This one I had some definite complaints about, but I also really enjoyed. I had mixed feelings. So I thought that this one was definitely, I enjoyed it more than the Shiver trilogy or the Mercy Falls trilogy. I never know what to call it. But so this one is less well known, but I really enjoyed this one more. I thought that the story was more engaging, the characters were more interesting. This one was extremely tropey, so, like, not necessarily the most creative, but definitely, like, fun and enjoyable. I thought that the way that they depicted the fairies in this was really good. They were very, like, creepy and brutal and non-human, and I really appreciated that it wasn't just like, oh, they're like people but prettier and with magic powers. I had some issues with this in the way that, for one thing, the romance in this, since it is one of those, like, supernatural romances, of course, the male love interest is, like, hundreds of years older than the girl, and I hate that in books. It always bothers me because I'm like, the issue with large age gaps is not the fact that they look old. It doesn't matter if the person looks young or old. The problem is the actual distance of age and life experience and the power dynamics it creates. And, like, I just find it extremely annoying when they're like, oh, this character's, like, way older than the other one, but it's okay because they look like they're the same age. That's not how it works. Oh my god. So that was annoying to me. The other issue that I had with this was that there are a couple of times in this book where the characters call another character schizophrenic as an insult. I understand that there are times in books where authors will have a character say something that is offensive or inappropriate or, like, just terrible or whatever to illustrate something about that character. You know, not that all the characters have to be, like, perfect sunshine all the time. But in this instance, there was no reason for them to be doing that. It didn't illustrate anything about the character, didn't add anything to the story or the character or the context or anything. It just like was not cool that that was included. Overall, I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars because it was kind of in the middle for me, but like still enjoyable. I probably will be reading the second book because I already own it. Then I read The Trials of Apollo, The Hidden Oracle by Rick Riordan. This is the first book in his Trials of Apollo series. This book follows Apollo, the god, who has been cast out of Olympus by Zeus and is now living as a mortal teenager, and he has to find Camp Half-Blood. He has to find demigods in order to protect him, and so he can like make his way in the world because he is an ancient god. He doesn't really know how to like live in the world, and especially live in the world as like a gawky teenager. This one was probably actually my least favorite of Rick Riordan's books. I know that a lot of people have been raving about this series as their favorite series of his, and it just like didn't hit me the right way. I think that it's not because it was like a bad book, it's just like a kind of humor that I didn't like. The way that he is done, he's very like self-centered and narcissistic and arrogant and all of this, and his character does grow over the course of the book, which I really appreciated. But I just like didn't enjoy it. I don't know. I think that his like arrogance and everything is supposed to be funny and charming, but it's just a type of joke that I didn't think was super funny. So I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read in January was actually one that I picked up at the meditation retreat that I went to, which is Invitation to Meditation by Howard Cohn. So Howard Cohn was actually one of the teachers at the retreat that I went to, and they had his book there, and I picked it up because I wanted to support him and because it's such a pretty cover, and I wanted something to read on the plane because I was thinking that I really wanted to read while I was in silence. The only thing I really missed was reading. So I really wanted to have something to read, but I kind of could tell that I wasn't really gonna want to read a story yet. So I picked this up along with another book actually, which I read while I was in the airport and on the plane. This is just a little book that is a nice introduction to meditation and mindfulness, kind of how to get started, and some basic information about it. So for me, it was kind of reiteration of a lot of the stuff that I had just heard because I had heard him speaking that whole week while I was on retreat, and it was a lot of similar information. But I think that it's a really nice little book. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. So that is all for my January wrap up. Let me know which Victoria/VE Schwab book you think I should read next, because I was super excited about Vicious, and now I want to read like everything by Victoria Schwab, but she has at least 3 other series out, and I'm not sure which one I should start with next. So let me know in the comments below if I should read, I think there's A Darker Shade of Magic, This Savage Song, and The Archived. I'm not sure if there are other ones, but those are the 3 that I know of. So let me know which one you think I should read next for my next VE/Victoria Schwab book, because I'm super excited about her. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!